Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to do another look at why fishing reels fail. This one is a South Bend Cimarron, and it doesn't have an anti-reverse. Well, I'm not that familiar with this reel at all. One thing I can tell you is that I hear that there's a bearing in there that's needs to be replaced. It's very noisy. Not even sure if we can do that or not. If we can, we will. But more importantly, I want to find out why this reel failed. And I don't know much about this reel, so I want to learn a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take this reel apart. I wanted to check here to see if there was a screw inside the cap. We'll take the reel apart. We'll see what the failure is. We'll see if it's something that can be fixed or not. And, well, we'll learn from it. I call these tuition reels. They're not very expensive. And, well, you can learn a lot and not spend a lot in terms of increasing your memory bank full of knowledge about why fishing reels fail, how they're made, what the weaknesses are, and so on. Well, I just took the click ratchet and the spool leveler off after I removed the spool. This is a plastic spool, and interestingly enough, it's got a lot of greening or corrosion on it, so it must be in the plating that there's something in there that is causing that corrosion, maybe a metal plating or something, not sure. We're going to remove the handle by turning it opposite of the way that it cranks the reel. So in this case, it's going to be clockwise. And there's going to be 4 side plate screws. And these screws should come out with a Phillips head screwdriver. There's a through slot on these. And while we're doing this disassembly, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, I want to encourage you to use that notification button. That way you'll see when I'm posting videos, and you can see if it's a video you like. Today I'm working on a lower end freshwater spinning reel. Tomorrow maybe a very big ocean trolling reel. You just never know. You're looking over my shoulder on the projects that come into my shop. And, well, some things I find in flea markets and some things I just find amusing that kind of warrant me taking it apart. For the most, this reel would never get serviced. It didn't get serviced. I found it at a flea market laying on a table for a couple of dollars as a parts reel. But the cost of the service and all of that stuff kind of makes these things disposable. So, well, we'll see. We took the 4 screws out. I put them on my desk here to make sure that they're all the same size. They are. And before we go any further, I want to encourage you to take pictures as you do your reel disassembly and servicing. The reason for that is you're probably not going to find schematics on reels like this. Those are burst diagrams that show you how the reel comes together and the parts and so on. And, well, if no schematics are available, you're not going to have much of a chance in terms of being able to see the orientation of the pieces and parts, and well, just in general the makeup of the reel. So do that if you can. There's a bushing in this side, so that's not making a noise. We have a cross-wind arm and a pin. That pin is going through the shaft of the reel, so we'll take that off. And once you take that off, you can remove the axle shaft from the assembly. When I take my pieces and parts off, they go into the parts tray. My parts tray is the bottom of a fast food container. And we'll set that to the side. What I'm really curious about is why the anti-reverse is not working. And there's something going on here. I haven't seen the assembly yet, but we'll remove the main gear and then we should be able to see that. And the main gear has a little tag spring here that should go inside the assembly here and allow this to operate. Unfortunately, this one is stuck, and that's probably stuck from lack of lubrication. That's why this isn't working, because this one is not moving. Well, I just may have just freed it up a little bit, so we'll see. If I keep the pressure on, yeah. So this is a relatively easy fix. So somebody threw away a reel because they didn't know that this little eccentric spring here It's just got dislodged somehow, probably because that little arm was sticking. So one of the things I find before you disassemble anything, just put some penetrating oil onto the piece that's sticky. A lot of times, and you can see it on this main gear here, a lot of times the grease dries up and gets in the track of the assembly, and when that happens, it acts as a glue. It keeps the piece from turning or doing its job, and well, when that happens, you get a failure point. So I just cleaned up the back of this. I used the penetrating oil and a cotton swab. If the gears are clogged, go ahead and take a hard brush and pull it through to enable you to get the old greases out of there. One of the things that's interesting to note with this one, this has that tag spring that's going to go into the slot of your anti-reverse dog or lever, but it doesn't have a window. Usually you'll see a window in the gear to allow you to align that. I don't think this reel has been apart. If it was, I would have said, okay, well, whoever got it apart didn't know how to reset that spring. But this one looks like it's got the original greases in it. And my guess is what happened was that that lever dried out, clogged the path of its throw, and that's why you didn't get the anti-reverse. Well, just getting rid of that old grease. I like to use soft approaches here. I'm using cotton swabs and just some liquids and the like. Don't want to get more aggressive than you need to. Let's come up top then. I think that might be a 12. It is I think it is. This is a deep socket. You're going to need a deep socket when you go to take off the rotor nut. Shouldn't be anything under here but a bearing. There's a bearing and a cap. And this is your anti-reverse. You can see how this lever is going to move in and out here. And I don't know if I have a bearing for that. If I don't, well, we're just going to give it to a kid and it'll be a little noisy. If I have a bearing for that, we'll replace it and it'll be less noisy. There's two screws that are holding on that cap. It's the cap and it's the anti-reverse stop. The two screws are the same, so I'm going to take those two, put them in the corner of my parts tray, take the rotor nut. I guess I'm going to leave the rotor nut on the rotor. And we should be able to remove this now. Just pulling it up completely. And well, I'll be a moment here. This is your assembly. I'm just going to check to see if I have a bearing that can be replaced. I'll shut the camera off for now. Okay, well, I was able to go out to my parts tray and find a replacement bearing. Once you found the replacement bearing, start by repacking. We're going to put that little metal shim in there. There's a couple of them. They go on the bottom of the case. And there's a washer on our pinion gear. Put some grease onto the pinion gear here. These points here are the stops for that anti-reverse dog. Check the teeth as you're doing this. Make sure that the pinion gear's teeth are solid. That didn't seem to be an issue when we were working on this before. Here's the replacement bearing. I'm going to oil that bearing. We had a little cap washer that went on top of that, and all of this goes back into the assembly then. With that in, we can put the cap back on. Notice that there was an opening here for that anti-reverse dog piece. And it fit just like that in that slot. That's where your pictures are going to help. It may seem simple enough to trust your memory to do that, but oftentimes you can make a mistake there and then the reel doesn't operate as it should. Okay, one on each side. These are magnetic screws. I have a magnetic tipped screwdriver, so in this case it actually helps me. And before you go too much further, turn it, make sure that it's turning free and easy, which it is. Now we can go about reinstalling the rotor. Check your rotor underneath, make sure that it's clear. This is your trip mechanism. So let's go ahead and put some grease, some oil onto that. I'm going to use a penetrating oil. That'll loosen up any greases that may have accumulated there. I'm also going to use penetrating oil on each seam of the bail and on the roller. It'll just help loosen up any dirt and grease that may be in there. Right. Next up then, we're going to take the rotor. There's a washer that goes on top. Just came off. Now I can grab the rotor. There's a keyway that goes between the slots on your rotor. There's a rotor nut that came off traditionally, so it's going to go back on in a clockwise manner. And I like to hand thread that as much as I can. Then I'll use that deep socket. If you don't have a tool like this, just use your socket wrench. They'll all work. You just can't use a flat wrench because or a box wrench. I'm not hearing that noise at all from the bearing anymore, am I? Okay, there's a slot here now. We're going to oil the dog. This bushing should come off this side. Clean the bushing up. The bushing goes in the back of the case. We want to re-grease the teeth of the main gear. So again, this is more for learning, and the reel is just not that valuable. And if you want to take it fishing, I'm going to probably put some line on it, go give it a few casts, see how it does, and then I'll probably donate it to a local fishing club that does derbies for children, teaching them how to fish. These are probably good like that. You're not going to worry about the reel if it does break. One never knows. Okay, I'm going to take that long prong of the eccentric spring. I'm going to aim it for the slot in the dog. Now let's see if that, it's hard to see because I'm not turning the main gear. We're going to have to wait to test. Okay, the axle shaft is next. So we found that the materials in this reel are not very good. We've got what's called pot metal for the gearing. It's rather inexpensive metal. And the bearing was certainly not a stainless steel bearing. And what that caused was rust to set in. The bearing noise got loud, and the rust probably is what settled in on that anti-reverse dog that caused that to freeze. Okay, you want your crosswind arm, and then it lays over your main gear like that. Then there's a small washer. This one was laying on the bushing in the case. That goes there. It kind of holds that crosswind arm in. And a little bit of grease onto the back end of this gear is okay for the inner bushing to ride. Now we can set the case back in. Make sure you get a nice snap like that. Take the 4 screws now. These go in each case. Well, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you'd like to learn more about how to service fishing reels, how they're made, what their uses are, a little bit maybe about the manufacturers. Yes, South Bend was named for South Bend, Indiana. If you have any questions like that, and you want to leave them in the comments section, I'll be happy to answer them for you. Maybe you're working on a reel and you're stuck. I'll leave that question in there as well. You can leave it in this video. You don't have to go search for the video for your reel. And it doesn't have to be about this reel whatsoever in terms of the questions. All right, got two more here. South Bend was eventually acquired by Gladding, and then Gladding sold South Bend when Gladding went bankrupt. Gladding was making fishing lines, and then they expanded to fishing reels. So sometimes you'll see the identical South Bend reel branded as a Gladding. That was during that transition. And then I forget exactly who's got the South Bend brand today. It might be a company called Big Mountain Sports out in Illinois. Not sure. Okay, let's put the last one of these in. This is where your parts tray helps, because you can look and see what's in your parts tray, see what you got left, and that'll oftentimes help you in terms of where your assembly is in the process. We have these two little washers here. I get questions on those. Those are for the line lay, for the height of the line on the spool. If you have your spool gathering line on the bottom but not the top, you have too many washers in. And reverse, if it's all gathering up here with less line below, that's an indication that the line is got too few washers and that you need to raise the spool. There are drag washers in here. They're probably Teflon. There's a retaining clip. I'm going to pull that out to see what we have. I was looking at that because sometimes they're just pressed in there and they're not even serviceable on the lower end reels. This one has the clip in it, so let's take a look. Wow, that guy's a little stubborn. That's a very strong spring in there. I'm going to use the pliers because one, I don't want to rip up my fingers, but two, I don't want that thing to shoot away. This is another sign of a reel that hasn't been cared for. There we go. We have Teflon washers, but we have metal, steel washers that have rusted. I'm not sure there's much we can do with these. Good news, we can separate. Good. I'm using a utility knife as a wedge to separate these. Just be careful. If you do this, you don't want to cut your fingers. You also want to see if you can't pop the washer out without breaking it, because you're not going to find replacement washers other than in a donor reel. Alright, this is one time where I'm going to use penetrating oil on Teflon washers that really don't benefit from it, but if I can use it to clean off the old rust in that, we're going to try and do that. You normally do not lubricate Teflon washers because, well, they're non-absorbent, they're non-permeable. I'm going to just use a little bit of steel wool now on the 3. And this is going to be a as best you can do kind of a situation here. You don't expect to fully restore the drag washers, just trying to make them functional. They'll function just because simply we've split them off the other side. To the extent that I can knock the rust off, we got tarnish now, but the rust is coming off. They will have some level of drag. The good news is this is a freshwater reel, and well, most people don't use the drag anyway. I'm going to put a little light grease, very light grease on the Teflon, even though it's not used normally on Teflon washers. I'm just going to do that to put a little bit more of a slip factor in there and protect it. Get penetrating oil into the cavity, and then we build it up. Drag washer. There's 2 round washers. They're called keyed washers. One goes on top, one goes on the bottom of a 6 drag set. Let's go ahead and put a little bit more grease on this one. This is the middle washer. So you use the eared washer in the middle. That was the one we're having a little bit of trouble getting out. And again, it's a plastic spool, so there is some flexing going on here too. The top washer and then the top of the keyed washers, and then this clip. Start the clip on one side, get it in the groove, and then to the best that you can, pull it around by your fingers. If you can't do that, use the assist like I did on the way out. I'm going to use the pliers to see if I can't make that work a little bit easier. There we go. We're back in with that. That's just a retaining clip. It's only going to hold the drag stack in. It's not serving any other function relative to the drag itself. You want to make sure it's in the groove. It is. Let's put this back on, put the handle on, and see how we did. Okay, let's give it a final test then. We've just taken the reel apart. You notice it was very dry. What we did was we went in, we pulled all the pieces, we did a good thorough cleaning of it. We showed you how the dirt and grease had affected the anti-reverse dog. How the eccentric spring couldn't pull it back and forth because it was frozen. We showed you the noise on the bearing and replaced the bearing. Let's see how we did. Well, that is one quiet reel now. Turns free and easy. And we have an instant anti-reverse. Well, there you go. We're going to call this one a success. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope you've seen why reels fail and what you can do to, well, get them fishing again, give them a second chance. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. I truly appreciate your efforts. To everyone, take the time to service your reels and they'll keep you fishing, keep you catching fish rather than sitting there wondering what happened to your tackle. To everybody, have a great day, a great weekend, and lots of fun on the water. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thanks for watching.